And now, you're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
What's up, RBLR Nation? Hope y'all are having a great week, whenever you're coming in and listening to it. I'm here with my co-host, Zach Blaine. Mr. Shriek, unable to join us this week, but he will be back soon, I'm sure. But we're, keeping it up and carrying on the good fight for him. I'll be leading this ship as well as Mr. Blaine, obviously, throughout the rest of this episode. And while you're here, if you like what you hear, definitely give us a like or a subscribe or a follow, whatever you want to do. You can also give us some comments if you're on YouTube. We'll post them. We'll talk about them because it's the off season. We need all the fodder we can get because there's only a few more weeks until the draft actually happens. So we could always use some new stuff to talk about. But before I go any further, I would like to formally introduce my co-host, Zach Blaine. How you doing tonight, Zach?
I'm doing good, brother. I'm coming off a good little UFL, or what do they call it, the XFL now, football weekend, man. It felt good to watch some not so great football.
Word. Heck yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I can't say I partook. I was recovering from a pretty nasty cold this weekend, but I'm glad to hear it was fun. Were there any teams or any players that stood out or any storylines?
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of the biggest storyline for me is how they've just kind of struggled to push it. Like I think the biggest crowd was like 7,000 people. It's just they've Memphis. I mean, living here in Tennessee, you would think we'd hear about the Memphis Showboats. We have failed to hear about them at all. So it's kind of just a weird situation.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I had no idea that was even going on this weekend.
Well, yeah, so I didn't either until I tuned into a what was I doing? It was Twitter or something that popped up that Destroying missed his first field goal. And if you don't know who Destroying is, UCF kicker from a while back, who ended up not actually kicking because he had a YouTube channel. So that was I saw that and I was like, oh, we're playing. Wow, okay, cool.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear it's somewhat entertaining, question mark.
It was something.
It was something. Okay. Fair enough. Well, hey, it's always good to get some XFL chat in there. I know you and Eureka were on the Bandits podcast. You were on that beat for a little bit.
That's actually who Memphis is now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Interesting. All right. Well, a little Tampa to Memphis action, that's how it be sometimes.
That's what it was.
That's right. But there was a little bit of Bucs news, mostly right before the episode, honestly. Antoine Winfield Jr. and Baker Mayfield both agreed to some contract restructures. There's not really a whole lot to talk about here. I just figured, we got to bring it up because it happened. But I thought that was interesting. Thought it was cool. I kind of expected maybe for Baker to just have an extension, but at the same time, we've talked about that throughout the offseason. It seems like it would be in the best interest of Baker Mayfield to sit a beat and continue to wait for that salary cap to continue to climb because it's only going to get bigger. So, quarterback salaries are just going to continue to inflate. And for him, if he has another good season, then he might set the market, which,
not so great for us, but for him, it's probably the right call.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you gotta look out for numero uno, and all those cliches basically say like, hey, these guys they're not doing it for charity. They're trying to get paid. So, good for him. Hopefully it works out for him because, hey, if it does, then that means that he played another heck of a season. And if he had another heck of a season, Bucs probably make the playoffs. So that's it's only a good thing in all honesty. But focusing on maybe some guys who didn't have great 2024s. We're going to be talking about some bounce back candidates. That's how I'll kick off the show before we get into the positional previews of the draft, which will come in the second half. We've got a few segments because, why not? So who comes to your mind first, Zach, when you think about this past season and any guys that are maybe candidates to have a good sort of return to form in 2025?
I mean, I think the biggest one that comes to mind is Antoine Winfield. He just had kind of a down season all around. Like, he wasn't necessarily garbage, but compared to what we're used to seeing him play at and him getting paid as one of the best safeties in football, you kind of expected more out of him. And he was just kind of middle of the road, like not bad, but not good, just kind of And I think out of everyone that we could see a bounce back, he's the most likely because he is kind of the star of this defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. He's probably the first name that a lot of people think of for this, and rightfully so. It's kind of boring, but it's because it's obvious. So
Exactly.
yeah,
I mean, if you want to dig deeper, you've got maybe Jamel Dean can stay healthy. If he can stay healthy for a whole season, which he's never done in his career, I consider that a bounce back in itself.
absolutely. No, 100%. If Jamel Dean stays healthy, he will parlay that into a pretty decent contract.
Yeah, I
For
need at least one interception this season, though, because God, it's been awful to watch.
Yeah, that'd be fun. But even if he doesn't, there are other ways to make an impact as a cornerback. Obviously, getting turnovers is something that the Bucs really struggled with this past season. And honestly, one of the bigger reasons their defense was so bad was because they just weren't able to get takeaways. And yeah, if he's able to contribute in that area, then that would be huge for sure. Absolutely. I think another guy that could have kind of a nice little return to form would be Levante David. Notice we're focusing on the defense because the defense, had a rough one. So Levante David, that as much as we've the secondary is much maligned, the linebackers in coverage were almost. I don't want to say more guilty, but they were just as guilty in terms of giving up yardage. Just watching offenses just pick them apart over the middle throughout this past season was a downer because Levante David, one of the best linebackers, one of the best players in Bucs history. So he's obviously kind of responsible for a lot of that, and unfortunately, it didn't really work out too well this past year. He was not very good in coverage. He was his usual solid self in the run defense, but man, if he could even just be slightly below average in coverage, that would be that would be such a massive upgrade. But
I think that's what scares me the most is that he's never really fallen off. Like he's never really been bad. So to see him kind of start to be bad, it scares me that it could be a old father time catching up to him, and I don't know if father time like
right, yeah.
For being an old fart.
No, I feel you. That's the unfortunate part about it is like you said, it's not Antoine Winfield's still young. He still could very well, regain form. But yeah, he's kind of David's kind of at that age to where like, oh, this might just be who he is now. Unfortunately,
exactly.
Which would really suck. Which would really suck for a franchise icon. But the hope is that maybe the Bucs bring some young blood in. Maybe they kind of galvanize his. Maybe his approach, not that it was from a lack of effort. I don't want to put that on him at all, but maybe it infuses him or eases a lot of the burden because, he was their best linebacker for better or worse last year. And, after that, it got real hairy. So,
he was to say he was our only interior linebacker last year.
Yeah, that would not be inaccurate. Yeah, no, absolutely. So when you have that kind of shoulder, that burden to shoulder, it can certainly be tough, especially for a guy like we've been mentioning his age. So hopefully Levante David gets a little bit more support this season, whether it's from Anthony Walker or Servassier Dennis. Maybe he turns out to be a good starter, or fill in the blank with whatever whatever rookie linebacker they bring in the draft, because I think we all expect them to bring in at least one. And that was the position we focused on last week. We'll be talking about safety later on in the episode. But anyways, shifting our gears a little bit towards breakout candidates, guys that you're hoping can sort of set a new norm in a positive way with their true talent level. Are there any guys that you're looking at that can really sort of break out? I know in baseball that's it's become like kind of a kind of thing because people just write articles claiming that Shohei Ohtani can have a breakout season. It's like, okay,
yeah, I think he's been breaking out every year.
Right, exactly. Like, how can an MVP break out? But any true breakout candidates that you can think of, Zach, for the Bucs coming up this year?
I want to say J-Mac. I want to say Bucky already had his breakout. So I think if he rushes for 1,500 yards next season, it's not really a breakout because we kind of, at this point, like he's a really good running back. And J-Mac, I think, as much as I hate to say it, with having Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, I don't think he gets a breakout because he's kind of, unfortunately, a little lower on the totem pole. Not unfortunately, it's a good problem to have, but
for sure,
I don't think he'll get his breakout season yet. I'm gonna lean more towards Servassier Dennis.
Ooh, okay, I love it.
I'm still very high on Dennis. Um, I think he has all the tools to be a very good interior linebacker. Will he get outplayed by Anthony Walker this season? I could see it because Anthony Walker, I think, is a very good inside linebacker. But if he can stay healthy, I think Dennis could have a breakout year if he gets the opportunity.
Wow. Okay, I love it. I love it. I love the Dennis inclusion, SVD, if you will. I'm going to go with Tyke Smith. I know he played well last year. I think people will kind of. I don't want to call him a household name. That's a bit putting it a little bit too dramatic, but he's definitely a known commodity. People aren't going to necessarily think of him as, oh, well, no, who could have seen him coming? But I do think that playing safety position all year, sort of getting that starting role, assuming, of course, the Bucs don't draft a safety in the draft in the first round, which we'll get into that in a later episode. But I don't know. I'm a pretty big Tyke Smith fan. I think he could turn out to be really good, especially if he's just sort of settles into that more natural. Well, I don't want to say more natural because he looked pretty good in the slot too. But I think
I was so against him when we drafted him because I was like, we just signed Whitehead, we brought Mike Edwards back, we don't need a safety,
right.
And then he played great. He was really good. I think I would love to see him at safety. I want to lead off by saying I think he should be our starting safety next to Antoine Winfield, but we just lost Mike Edwards to Kansas City. He just signed with Kansas City, so it's like at this rate we're going to have to draft one or sign. I don't want to say a bum, but I mean like at this rate, if you're still in free agency, unless there's a few names that I could say are like not complete trash, but if you're still in free agency, there's a reason why. So
For sure.
I think we're going to end up drafting one, and it worries me that might push him back down to slot, and I think he needs to be at safety.
Yeah, and that's certainly a valid concern. But sort of a more optimistic way of looking at it would maybe be that, hey, they draft someone as insurance. They've got to have someone backing them up. You know what I mean? So
we drafted edges early for the last like 4 years.
Well,
depth.
Right. For sure. But Tyke's definitely an interesting guy to kind of monitor, in terms of breaking out and having a really nice 2025. I think he could really, really submit a good performance, especially because I'm also a big Izzian guy. I think Christian Izzian could really, really have a nice season. He's just, he was undrafted, kind of a fight tooth and nail for a roster spot. And I think Bowles really likes him too. So I think that, lining up Izzian at the slot and having Tyke at safety would be kind of an interesting way to go about it. But obviously we've been talking a lot about, what the Bucs will do in the draft. And there were some interesting comments being made by Bowles to the press because I think most people, ourselves included, assume that the Bucs are going to go defense in the first round. But he kind of made it seem like, hey, it's still an open conversation, which I don't know. That's certainly not not the wrong way of looking at things. I mean, you want to go best player available. If you think highly enough of T-Mac out of Arizona and he's there, then you don't want to preclude yourself from taking that position. But at the same time, you got to also think realistically. So, Zach, what are your thoughts on offense versus defense in first round? Maybe just setting aside positions even. Which side of the ball would you be surprised to see the Bucs take an offensive player this year?
I would not be surprised at anything the Bucs do in the draft. In the most just they surprise me every year. I don't know what to expect from them. I think as much as I love T-Mac, one of my favorite players in this draft, I don't see how he makes us better this season.
That's a good point.
I mean, he's not gonna overtake Chris Godwin or Mike Evans. So what is he gonna push J-Mac further down the roster? Like I think J-Mac is a really good player. Sure. I would love to have them both playing, but when you have 4 wide receivers on the roster, they're not all going to get snaps like that. They're not going to all get first-team snaps. So you're drafting somebody to either push J-Mac down or to sit behind Mike Evans for a year. Not a bad call. Like, I think T-Mac would do phenomenal sitting behind Mike Evans because he's the same kind of receiver as Mike Evans. That would be phenomenal. But when you have holes that we need to fill on defense, when you have holes at inside linebacker, you've got holes at corner, which Bowles has openly, or was it Bowles or like that said, one of them said, we know we have depth issues at corner. That's not exact verbiage, but that's essentially how I'm calling it.
Right. No, I get you.
Yeah. So I think they know that there's holes. So to say that it's not like decided, I don't think that we can necessarily take the approach of best player available. I think we need to be on defense.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's tough to balance. Like you don't want to, because you don't want to miss out on a generational talent, which I'm not necessarily sold on T-Mac being that, but at the same time, you don't necessarily want to miss out on that just because
you pass on him and he becomes Justin Jefferson.
Right.
And then you're like, well, we could have taken him at 19. Then it becomes, wow, Jason Light's an idiot for doing that. Like,
right, exactly.
It's a catch-22 because if he's there, look, I love McMillan. Like, he's legit one of my favorite players in this draft. Him and Genty, offensive, those are my two favorites. But if Genty fell to us at 19, like, I would love to take him, but it just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Like, Genty and Irving together would be a cool duo, but does that really help us win right now?
Right. And
it does.
Yeah, is it worth the opportunity cost of, not being able to select a defensive player?
At some point, you're going to someone's got to be the lead back, and I think Genty is going to be a lead back from day one. I think Bucky Irving's a lead back. So that pushes Rachaad White out of the picture, in my opinion, except now we're looking at, well, who's going to be number one? Because we can't really give them both 1,000 yards rushing every year. That's not necessarily possible. So I just think at this point, we can do best available, but it has to be best available defensive guy.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I am with you. It's just I can kind of understand the trepidation. Plus, you never want to show all your cards. Like it can be kind of obvious what a team is going to maybe do, but you also still want to be open for business. Maybe theoretically they trade back if they so they want to keep their options open. I get, and it's also they're talking to the press. Like you can't really ever take anything that they say to the media very seriously. So, but I thought it was an interesting conversation to have because I'm with you. I do think that they, defensive best player available is totally fine. But it's still an interesting conversation to have because we did talk about wide receivers to start, our positional previews off for the defense for the draft. So I thought it was, it's at least worth mentioning. But if you're looking for an upgrade across your wardrobe, regardless of whether you're thinking, offense, defense, whatnot, definitely head to shop.rblrsports.com. We've got some really great gear for you. Anything Tampa Bay sports related, we've got you covered. We'll give you a promo code that's Cannon, CANNONS, for 10% off your entire order. We'd really appreciate it. Definitely head on over there and check it out in Sport Podcast. All right, so the second half of this episode, we're going to be talking about safeties. Yep, we're at that part of our draft preview. There are a lot of really fun ones, and we'll get to all of them, and we'll start with our round 1/round 2 guys. Zach, kick us off. Who's your round 1/round 2 safety for this upcoming draft?
I want to lead this off by saying I don't want to take a safety first or second round. But,
really? Not second round either? Interesting.
Okay. I mean, second round, if this guy fell to us in the second round, if my guy right now falls to the second round, I would take him in a heartbeat. I'm going to go with Nick Emanwari. Just an absolute stud. I mean, he played in the SEC, which gives you a little bit of hope already. 6'3", 220, ran a 4.38 40, 43-inch vert. The guy is just an athlete. He has like the hands of a wide receiver, so he's going to get you turnovers, which is something that Tampa has kind of lacked the last few years. The negatives are he kind of plays lackadaisical. Like he's not 100% all the time, which I think plays into how athletic he is. I think that he kind of takes plays off because he feels like he can, which I'm cool with. I like it. He's a stud. I'm not too mad about it, but I think at the next level, there's going to be issues with that. So if he can clean that up, I think that he will be a Pro Bowl level safety in the future.
Yeah. I mean, he's probably one of the most athletic people in this draft in general. Whoever ends up with him is just, it's going to be insane. A guy that size moving as well as he does, being as explosive as he is. It is remarkable. They create. I know you're not a big fan of it, but that RAS score, he's like a 10. I think. I don't know.
I do think he scored a 10. Like I said, he's just a stud, like an athletic freak.
Yeah, ridiculous.
That reminds me of like Jeremy Chin, a much better version of Jeremy Chin. Well, hopefully a much better version of Jeremy Chin, but
right.
he's just, I think, all around. I think he's going to be just a freak of nature in the NFL.
Yeah, he's definitely shot up a lot of draft boards because I think at first he was more so thought of as a round 2 guy. But then he started testing athletically, and teams were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this guy's this guy's different." So I would be surprised if he lasted through round 1, like you said. If he's there in round 2, something might have gone wrong.
I would honestly, if he makes it to round 2, I would want Tampa to trade up and take him.
Yeah, I don't blame you. He would be really, really interesting, especially if they get an edge rusher or a corner in that first round, and then supplementing that with him in the second round. That would just be instant. Galvanization of the defense.
If we took a corner first round and him second round, I would be in awe. If we take an edge first round, I think we need a corner second round. I don't think we can wait any longer than that.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of with you, and we'll get into all that, especially because stick around because we've got the mock draft right before our draft, our kind of a consensus mock draft, so to speak. So definitely stick around for that. That'll be a few weeks from now, but yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how the Bucs prioritize these positions. But my guy is Malachi Starks out of Georgia. Kind of tough to parse out who he is as a player because unfortunately he didn't really grade out very. He's kind of the opposite of Emanwari. He did not grade out well athletically. But he's just talked about really highly. He was, really, really good in tackling. He was solid in coverage. He played a lot at Georgia. He got a lot of playing time there. And he's only 21. So that's kind of the big upside with him is his youth. But my kind of concern is that how much more can he develop? Unfortunately, how much does that limited athletic profile limit his ceiling? Exactly. Because there's a lot of development that he did at the University of Georgia, and rightfully so. They've got one of the best player development systems in college football. Otherwise, they wouldn't win all the time like they do. Yeah. So the question sort of is how much better can he get already? And he's only 21, so hopefully the answer is a lot better. But it's kind of that'll be something to monitor for him, especially on draft night. Will teams be sort of scared away by maybe his limited upside that his athletic profile would suggest. But the good news is he was super productive. His athletic ability is a bit limited, but that didn't seem to hurt him too much in covering running backs. We'll see if that remains the case with NFL running backs because obviously different levels of play. So yeah, Malachi Starks, there's certainly some really big positives. Yeah, I think he's got probably a much higher floor than Emanwari, but his ceiling is very much limited compared to Nick. Yeah. Of South Carolina. So
I think he's going to be one of those, how last year I said that Penix would be the best quarterback long-term, but Daniels will be the best quarterback right away. I think that's kind of like how it's going to be here. I think that Starks is going to be like a day one starter, probably the best safety right away, but I don't think he holds that best player, like best safety out of this draft class into the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that at all. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. So it's going to be interesting. We were talking about drafting offense versus defense, trying to think about the long-term considerations of your roster versus, wanting to take advantage of the fact that they have a good quarterback, Baker Mayfield, under a relatively team-friendly deal, and that's not going to last forever. That's not going to be the case moving forward. So trying to balance the win now versus win in the future approach to this draft is going to be something that the Bucs are always thinking about. Every team's always thinking about it, but especially with this sort of safety comparison, because I think these are probably the two round one safeties that a lot of guys and a lot of people think of when they look at this draft class. But moving on to the round 3/round 4 segment for safety position, I'll kick things off. I've got Billy Bauman Jr. out of Oklahoma. Luckily for Bauman, he's got a lot of special teams contributions at the college level. So that's kind of a big plus, especially for a guy going in the middle of the rounds like this. Because, these types of guys usually make the roster, but they're not necessarily starting. If you have a round 4 guy starting in a position, that means something went wrong. So it's going to be important for these guys to be able to contribute on special teams. You'll hear that a lot when we talk about these round 3 pretty much round 4 on, and Bauman Jr. is a round 4 type of guy. 7.53 RAS score. He's very undersized, but he's super athletic. He can kind of make up for it with a lot of speed and a lot of explosiveness. His vertical and broad jump numbers were really, really good, but he lacks the physicality due to that undersized nature of his athletic profile, and he just doesn't tackle very well, unfortunately. But he's great in zone, super good ball hawk, really good ball skills. So Bauman Jr. is really, really fun in a lot of ways. Just he can be a bit limited in terms of how much he can contribute with his tackling and in run support, which is something that the Bucs sometimes lean on. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they maybe take a chance in round 4 if Bauman Jr. is still there. But Zach, hit us with your guy. Who's your round 3/round 4 safety?
Was he under 6 foot?
I think so.
I was looking at him and I was like, this guy could be really good, but I believe he was like 5'11 and a half or 5'11, and I was just like, ooh, I don't think I couldn't go with him for that exact reason.
Yeah, and not only just like his height, because you see undersized safeties in terms of height all the time, but his physicality, like it's more about his I don't want to just his his physicality, more about. Yeah, he's not exactly he's not like us, he's not a big boy. He's not chowing down on cheeseburgers and stuff like that.
Exactly. To me, his build is more like a corner build and not a safety. But he's not athletic enough to play corner. Well, not that he's not athletic. I'm sure he's very athletic. But, like, to play corner, he just doesn't have that physicality or that the physical abilities to play corner.
Right. No, I totally get you. Yeah, so that's Billy Bauman Jr. He's a bit undersized, unfortunately, but he does make up for it with a lot of athletic ability in other areas, just like you said, maybe not necessarily well suited for the outside. But he did line up quite a bit at slot, and he could line up at linebacker in a pinch if they're, playing in a nickel or a dime look. So that's kind of interesting to have that versatility. I know the Bucs have really leaned on that, especially at the safety position. But who's your round 3 or round 4 guy, Mr. Blaine?
I'm going to go right back to a prototypical NFL size safety. Kevin Winston Jr. I'm thinking he's probably around 4 guys, 6'1 and a half, 215. Injury prone, which unfortunately kind of sucks. I think that's what pushes him down to this level in the draft. Really, really good run defender. He lacks a lot of experience because of injuries, but when he's in, he's a solid player. I don't think he's going to be a ball hawk. I don't think he's going to get you a lot of turnovers, but his run support and his ability to tackle are there. I think he could be a very good safety in the future if he gets healthy. I don't think he's a guy that you can draft in the 3rd or 4th round and start. I don't think that he's at that level yet, but I think he's going to be able to grow into that. The biggest thing is just the injuries. If he can get the injuries under control, I think he missed almost all of last season at Penn State. So outside of that, though, I mean, that's the only big red flag in my book, which Tampa is. I don't want to talk trash on Tampa, but we seem to have injury issues especially with the defensive back. So
sure.
I don't think taking an already injury riddled guy is the best idea, but it could work out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and if he didn't have the injury bug, then like you said, maybe he would be drafted a little bit higher. So it's sort of one of those taking a flyer, taking a risk type of things that you do in round 3 or round 4. So yeah, I like Winston Jr. a lot. He's like you said, he's certainly not without his warts, but unfortunately, when you get to this area of the draft, there's going to be a lot of reasons not to draft these guys, right? But that's the whole point. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be there. But yeah, I like Winston a lot. But who's your day 3 guy? We're starting to round out this safety draft position. Who you got?
All right. We're just going to go right back into an injury-riddled player. I've got Shiloh Sanders.
Okay.
He didn't get an invite to the combine, which I think is low-key kind of criminal. I think he played very, very good football. My bold take is that if he stays healthy, he might be the best Sanders out of the 2 Sanders brothers to come out of this draft. I'm not high on Shedeur. I know a lot of people are. I hope I'm wrong because I would love to see the brothers play in the NFL. But I think Shiloh was very, very good when he was playing. Unfortunately, he just got diagnosed with a shoulder issue or just had surgery on a shoulder issue they're expecting it to take 6 months for him to be back to football, like playing football. So this is a guy, if you take in the late rounds, I wouldn't be shocked if he went undrafted because of it. But if you take him in the late rounds, don't expect him to play this year. But I think having him in an NFL locker room and having him develop under other starters is a good thing for him. So while he might not bring an impact to this season, I think in the future he'll be very, very, very good. He led Colorado, or is in the top 9 all time for a single season tackles at Colorado, and only played there 1 year. So he's all around, I think, a very good player.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the name brand recognition for sure.
That helps too. That's going to bring fans to the stadium. So
yeah, exactly. So it's fun. Shiloh's definitely an interesting guy, like you said, maybe even an undrafted guy. Sort of the type of player that a team just kind of signs and then says, "All right, go rehab. Go get healthy." And maybe he plays his way onto a practice squad eventually, and then hopefully can turn himself into a starting level safety at the NFL level. But certainly talent is there. It's just like you said, the injuries thing is kind of a concern. If that wasn't the case, maybe he's more of a solidified draftable player. But like you said, that shoulder thing just making it not impossible for him to play in his first season, but making it much more difficult.
The worst timing it could have been.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he went and played in the Senior Bowl, had a very good Senior Bowl, and then I think a big part of it is everyone he's playing under the shadow of not only his dad being the head coach, but then his brother being a starting quarterback. So I think he kind of gets overlooked in a sense. Like, obviously he's a Sanders kid. Like, everyone knows who he is, but a lot of people don't necessarily watch him play. They watch his brother play. So I feel like if you watch him play, that's what you're kind of going to get out of him. And it's very good football.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because he, I think at least I can't count myself in this crowd. Like, I think of Travis Hunter as like a Sanders kid, even though, I know he's not.
Agreed. Yeah. No, you're spot on. He's followed Dion everywhere he's gone.
Right. So I sort of think of Travis Hunter as almost falling into that same category of
then you got Dion, Shador, right. Travis, and then
exactly.
He's almost like the redheaded stepchild, and he's not even the stepkid. That would be Hunter. So
right, exactly. Yeah.
Weird thing to think about, but I do feel like that plays a role in kind of not necessarily his development, but why like he's not necessarily seen as much nationally as the rest of them are.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely don't disagree. My guy for day 3 is more of a round 5 guy. So he's a little bit more solidified in his draftability. Malachi Moore. He played the star in Nick Saban's scheme quite a bit, which is sort of like a second linebacker or a second quarterback, if you will, on the defense. Had a lot of responsibilities in that position, which I think is a big reason why he shoots up the board a little bit here. Because, you look at him and he's definitely not, he's kind of another undersized guy. He also has a tough medical history, had a head injury last year. And he's not necessarily athletic enough to really quite make up for that size. So that also kind of stinks. Not much of a thumper. He's not going to give you any, Cam Chancellor type hard hits or anything, but then again, who is? But he's a very heady player, really intelligent out there, really solid footwork, and he's got great tackling form. So he does a lot of the really, really just, the fundamentals are good with him. But unfortunately, his upside might be lacking a little bit. So Malachi Moore, he's got a lot of special teams to play as well. So I would really like him as sort of a third safety, almost maybe a guy that you'd put on the practice squad to really, do a lot of different things out there and really challenge the offense in practice. I think that would be a really valuable role for him. And then eventually, as he starts to learn and maybe get into an NFL, he gets healthy, he gets into an NFL training regimen, maybe he can develop into a rosterable safety. But Malachi Moore, I really like him out of Alabama. I think he'd be really interesting. But we're nearing towards the end of our episode. We really appreciate y'all for tuning in. Definitely stick around because next week we are going to be talking about Mr. Blaine's favorite position, cornerbacks. So he'll have a lot to say about it, as will I, as will Musab. We'll definitely be able to talk some stuff about these cornerbacks because there are some really good ones. There are some really interesting ones. So we'll be talking about that next week. So stick around for that. We really appreciate y'all for tuning in, though. We'll see you next week, regardless of how much news is coming out. We're always going to be coming out with episodes once a week. Give us a follow at RBLR Bucks or at RBLR Sports. But until then, thank you so much again, and thank you to my co-host. And as always, go Bucks.
Go Bucks.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.